Okay, hi everyone. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about something that usually gets overlooked in our sphere, and that is the human side of testing. So let's start with the next slide. Just briefly tell me who I am. My name is Alona Kovalenko. I'm working as a senior QA engineer at BEC Financial Technologies company. And this December, exactly on the 1st of December, I celebrated my 8th anniversary as working as tester. And during this time, I've come to the conclusion that our biggest challenges, as well as our biggest strengths, aren't just technical, they are psychological, emotional, and interpersonal. Today, I want to explore 5 key areas that shape our work as testers. Let's move to another slide. They are cognitive bias, motivation, stress, collaboration, and adaptability. First of all, I wanted to start with cognitive bias because they are inevitable part of being human. They are also called heuristics, and we adopt them to simplify our reality. They can help us to make decisions quickly, yes, on the one hand, but on another hand, they may lead us astray. On the next slide, I'm going to show you 5 most popular cognitive bias with illustrations how they work exactly in testing. And then we'll talk about how to get rid of them, or at least mitigate their influence on our job. So let's start. First is confirmation bias. You tend to notice things that are easy to remember and they support what you already believe, your assumptions, ideas, and you ignore things that don't support your ideas. In testing, it can work, for example, when you do believe that the login area has some problems, and you put all your efforts into testing that specific area. While, for example, payment workflow may also continue some problems. But due to the fact that you're pretty sure that exactly login issue has some problems, you put all your efforts in the area that contains less issues, or even doesn't contain them. Anchoring bias. The first thing you learn or hear tends to your mind and influences how you judge everything else. For example, your first smoke tests passed. So you see this green light that we are waiting all for, and then you skip more thorough testing because you're pretty sure that everything works fine. Or even more common example. We all know the situation when the developer comes to us and says, I've developed this feature, it works pretty well. And unconsciously, this idea is anchored in our mind. And again, we skip more thorough testing just because of this. Then comes availability. You focus more on things that are easy to remember, even if they're not so important. Let's imagine the situation that you have missed some bug and it's already on production. And later on, when you come back to testing this area, you will focus mostly on this particular area because this bug is still fresh in our mind, although this bug may be fixed already. And issues may contain in some other modules. Then let's move to overconfidence bias. You tend to believe that you are more skilled and experienced than you really are. And no, it's not about saying that you're not a professional of what you're doing. I do believe that if you have been working for some time in your sphere, in your tiny area, you're a professional. But at the same time, it's super easy to fall into a trap. We've seen it all. And we may skip some tests because we are pretty sure that we know the system very well. But it's important to keep in mind that every system is unique, and humility here is the key. And then it comes hindsight bias. After something happened, it seems like it was obvious all along. Again, coming back to the bug on production that we've got. Then the whole team says, how we could miss it? It was so obvious. It was so evident. That's just impossible. But in fact, it is possible. Because this hindsight bias plays with our mind games. And sometimes we follow these games. And when I was thinking about some examples, when I met this cognitive bias in my experience, one situation came to my mind when we were testing some workflow in subscription, and our particular team was mostly concentrated on backend because frontend was covered by another team. And later on, we found out that there is some problem in between these interactions. And it's not about shifting the responsibility to someone particular, because it is our shared responsibility providing a good quality to end customers. But it's just to emphasize that this cognitive bias, they really influence a lot. They influence how we are creating test cases, how we are even communicating with developers. And then the question would be, how can we mitigate them in their influence on us? And the answer is on the next slide. First, use diverse test scenarios, challenge assumptions, conduct peer reviews to expose blind spots, use checklists to reduce reliance on memories, rotate testers to bring fresh perspectives, use exploratory testing to uncover some unexpected issues. Understand when you're making assumptions. It's the first step to objectivity. And obviously, foster psychological safety for people to feel confident asking questions. So, cognitive bias are a part of being human. But as testers, our job is to challenge these assumptions and advocate for quality, because acknowledging this bias is the first step that will not only improve our work, but the whole development process overall. And now, let's talk about motivation. And maybe I will right now try to test this comments section and ask you to write down at least one word that characterizes your motivation. So, what is motivation for you? What motivates you at your working place? Just one word, that will be enough. During previous times, the first comment from the audience was money. And the second comment was more money. Let's see whether it's the same here or not. Recognition. Okay, thank you very much. Very good and valid point. Any other comments? Or okay. If something comes to your mind later, we will take that into account. Personal development. Good points. Thank you very much. And we will actually cover both of them on the next slide. Or not on the next slide, just during the presentation. Because testing can be repetitive. It can be thankless. And we need to stay engaged somehow, right? Another comment is influence in development. Okay, so very interesting. We'll also talk about this a little bit later, but thank you for your answers. They really show a good direction and highlight your pure motivations. As for me, my motivation comes, first of all, from purpose. Knowing that my work prevents real-life failures, whether it's a bank application that I'm working on right now or it's a game subscription, it gives me drive. I'm not just blindly clicking on the buttons or doing some repetitive job. I'm improving and protecting user experience. But also, as far as I know, motivation comes from growth and recognition. Exactly those things that you have mentioned here in chat. When we're involved in the whole development process, from the very beginning till the very end, when our feedback is valued, and when we feel this area for growth and for learning, it's the moment where we thrive. And here, what helped me also to think about my career path was analyzing my responsibilities overall. What energizes me and what drains me. And then I was able to focus more on things that energize me. And honestly, it helped me a lot to understand why I'm working and why do I need to wake up every working day and go to work. And it wasn't like a torture. It was from interest, this motivation. There are like two kinds of motivation, from and to, right? So you can shift your motivation and move into the direction of something that you want to develop, those skills that are already in you. For example, for me, I feel most alive when I explore new features, think about edge cases, and obviously communicate with the team. Because just doing some repetitive regression runs all the time, that could be tough. And to foster this engagement, what can we do as testers? First, gamify the process and celebrate bugs as wins, not just some annoyance. You can rotate tasks to avoid the monotony. Encourage your colleagues to specify whether it's security or accessibility testing, that you will also have some area for improvement. And create a culture where asking questions is welcomed. It's not feared. And now I wanted to talk about stress, but not as a challenge, but rather as a tool. And on the next slide, we can see here the diagram based on Yerkes-Dodson law. It shows us the curve with three zones: calm, eustress, and distress. It shows how overall our stress affects performance. So in the first zone, we are calm. You're relaxed, maybe too relaxed. It's your comfort zone, let's say. It feels comfortable, obviously, yes, but it's not where the growth happens. Then we hit the sweet spot, and this is eustress. It's already stress, yes, but it has some positive connotation. For example, you have caught some critical issue, or you feel the pressure of upcoming deadline. You still feel the stress, but it doesn't have any negative influence on you. And it's actually essential for peak performance. But if we push too hard, we find ourselves in distress zone. And this is already where stress becomes with a negative connotation, because you feel disengaged. If you don't pay attention to your condition for a really long period of time, it can lead to burnout, fatigue, or serious health problems. So what I wanted to say in this slide overall is that not all stress is bad. In fact, a moderate level of stress, and by this I mean this eustress, is effective for our peak performances. And our task as testers is to differentiate when we are hitting into distress zone and take some actions. Because stress is just a signal. If you learn how to use it, you can use it wisely. This was a great, sweet theory. And sometimes the truth is bitter. And we may notice sometimes when we already are in distress zone. And even if we noticed and we didn't stay silent, for example, we communicated it with the team, with our managers, we asked to take some work off our shoulders, and unfortunately, we have tight deadlines. We have last-minute changes, the pressure of not missing anything. And then we already find ourselves in stress zone or burnout. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide. You can briefly get acquainted with the differences between stress and burnout. But I would rather like to talk here about burnout because it doesn't look like exhaustion. Not always. Sometimes it's just disengagement, cynicism, or drop in quality. It's a chronic state of emotional, physical exhaustion. And when it hits, it doesn't hit the individual only. It influences on the whole work environment. How? The answer is on the next slide. First, it reduces productivity and job performance because burnout tester doesn't have the motivation to look for these edge cases, to challenge systems. Even a simple task can sound overwhelming for a person. And then it can lead to some delays or drop in quality. And secondly, it influences the whole work environment because burnout testers and team members, they don't want to solve some complex situations. They start to be passive-aggressive, and during every conflict, they start to point fingers instead of putting all the efforts in resolving these unpleasant situations. And this creates a cycle. Poor performance leads to frustration, which leads to more stress, and then the cycle continues all the time. So then the question would be, what can we do to avoid these situations or reduce the influence? First, obviously recognize the signs. Irritability, procrastination, feeling overwhelmed. It would be your personal responsibility to pay attention to your own personal health condition. Then, don't be afraid to normalize talks with your colleagues about your health condition. Encourage breaks, respect boundaries. And there are two tools that I wanted to share with you that they are helping me a lot right now. Maybe you will have some suggestions and other tools that help you in these conditions. If you're under pressure, in stress situation, I will gladly listen to them and discuss. But for me, first tool is Eisenhower decision matrix. First of all, what I usually do, I just write down everything on paper, not just keeping everything in mind, because from time to time you may feel that you're just overwhelmed. It feels like burnout, but if you put down all the tasks that you need to do, you realize that it's just impossible to manage all these tasks simultaneously. In head, they seem to be pretty simple, but when you start doing them, you already feel overwhelmed. So first of all, we are writing down, putting on the piece of paper, everything that we need to do. And then we divide these tasks that are on our plate right now into 4 sections. If this task is urgent and important, then obviously we prioritize it and do. If it's not urgent, but still important, let's decide whether you need to do it now or maybe later. Maybe there is a room for postponing this task. If it's urgent and not important, delegate it to someone else. And if it's not important and not urgent, just get rid of it, at least for some period of time. Later on, you will be able to come back to this task, but not now. And second tool, that is something that works in rather long-term perspective, because it's the table. During presentation in audience, I actually printed out these papers, but if you want, I will be able to send this Excel spreadsheet to your email or messages if you would like to. But the main idea is as follows. You can see here the dedication of your physical, emotional, and professional conditions in your life. And one day you sit down with this sheet of paper and put the date in the first cell. And in this particular column, one by one, you go answering all these questions that evaluate your different conditions, putting then marks from 1 to 10, where 10 is terrible condition, 10 is excellent. For example, let's take one question. Do you maintain a healthy and regular eating routine? If you do it always, you'd put it 10, no questions. If you never stick to this rule, you put 1. And you go on with all this question. And then you repeat this exercise in, let's say, 1 month or 2 months. The main idea is to see the dynamics, because these marks, they will definitely change. They won't be static all the time. And then you sit down and analyze what was the root cause for some change. For example, when I came back from vacation, I had everywhere almost 10 marks for all my health conditions. But later on, when I was approaching to burnout, the decrease was drastic. And I realized that there are some things that I was able to influence on, but there were also some things that I couldn't have any influence. But it helped me to analyze and don't repeat mistakes that I had influence on later on. And I would like to finalize this section with words of American psychologist who said, when workers are suffering from burnout, their productivity drops, and they may become less innovative and more likely to make errors. If this spreads throughout an organization, it can have a serious negative impact on productivity, service quality, and the bottom line. So, testing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. That's why let's pace ourselves. And now we are moving to communication section, because we all know that testing doesn't happen in a vacuum. We're constantly working with developers, product owners, sometimes even end customers. And communication is the glue that holds people in the team together. But here is the catch. Developers and testers are usually talking in different languages. Testers are discussing risks and edge cases, while developers are talking about performance and architecture. Bridging that gaps takes efforts. Sorry, my sickness a little bit when I came into chat. But overall, we recently had the situation with developers when we were working on some important project, governmental one. So everyone, it was a top priority, and everyone in the team was pretty actively involved. And when testers already created some test cases, developers offered their help to analyze them. And that was the moment where I saw that some of test cases were absolutely unnecessary and useless, while some of them didn't cover some technical particular areas. That's why, first of all, I understood that it's important to share testing strategy early, because when people know what and why you're doing it, they trust you more. And this trust makes collaboration smoother. And also, it's important to ask questions. What we are doing? What are the riskiest parts are in future or during this development? What assumptions are we making? It's inside of QA team as important. Using the same tools like Jira, Slack, or Confluence, not different ones. Open feedback channels, clear documentation, and even simple talks. Even a regular question, how are you doing? It's already a good conversation starter. So to improve collaboration, I've gathered some tips. First is using bug reports as game starter, not just a blame game. Then also don't be afraid to ask questions. What are the riskiest parts? What assumptions are we making? Join all the meetings, not only retros, for example, but planning to be a part of the whole development process from the very beginning till the very end. And also share your test strategy early, because transparency builds trust. And last section that I wanted to cover here in this presentation is learning and adaptability, because you're right now participating in great event, Tester Summit. Definitely you will have some insights about processes from technical and non-technical perspectives. This is inevitable part of becoming better and better professional, because IT sphere overall, it is extremely dynamic, and staying static is not an option at all. That's why it's important to join conferences, to increase your network, to join some communities, read blogs all the time. You can also encourage your team members to share their insights and their learnings inside the team. You can try to experiment with these insights. See how do they work overall. And within some period of time, do the retrospectives. What worked and what didn't work. Then you will be able to adjust your work direction, taking into account things that worked for you, and thus constantly improving the development process and ways of working overall. So we are all in the same team, and our goal is not just to break the product, but rather to make it better. And always, every bug teaches us something, not just pointing fingers to each other, but rather understanding how we can improve then the process. Because we are doing it constantly and regularly, every day. So what I wanted to say overall was this presentation. Testing is more than just finding bugs. It's about resilience, curiosity, and collaboration. It's about understanding how people think and how systems fail. That's why let's challenge our bias, let's support each other, and don't stop in our learnings. And thank you for being part of this journey and making quality our shared responsibility. So now we can move to Q&A sessions. If you have any questions or suggestions, or you want to share in chat some your insights or interesting facts or tools that helped you to go through the through stress or some situations at work, I will be gladly reading them aloud. And we have the first question. Why is communication between testers and developers so susceptible to misinterpretation? So if I understand properly, the question is why it's easy to misinterpret the communication, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But overall, if we are talking not about automatic testers, because I'm, for example, manual tester, I do see this huge gap between developers and testers. Because developers are purely technical people, and testers usually non-technical. And that's why we are really talking different languages. And it's a very important gap that shouldn't be omitted. You need to take some measures to think how to bring everyone on one page. And I mentioned some tools that helped me, but from my perspective, communication is the key. You can talk in different languages, you can have different perspectives, but being transparent and being open with people, it will improve all these processes and will make all this collaboration smoother. I hope I answered your question, because I'm right now moving on. W których momentach sprintu, sorry for my Polish, it's not perfect fun, I'm still learning, but w których momentach sprintu najczęściej dochodzi do napięć między QA a devami i z czego te napięcia wykonają? What can I say? So it's about the tension between testers and developers, and at what moments these tensions rise. From my perspective, first of all is the first arguments where you can face these issues is when you put the estimations, because developers may think that they work a lot and it will require a lot of time to complete their development process, but testing is something simple. And that's why it's already in either refinement meetings you can face this situation, or during like estimations. Other things that I saw is, for example, when there is a bug. And it's about a lot the communication and approach. Because on the one hand, testers can approach to developer and start blaming them for the issue that they have encountered. Or the tester can be pretty neutral and professional, but the developer may take it personally. And it's an art to smooth this collaboration, because to put the bug finding in a pretty neutral way, not offensive one, and explain for the developer where it appears and when it can be fixed. I think this is the moment when most tensions rise. I hope it was also answer for the question. Next one. Które zachowania liderów technicznych potrafią jak najbardziej zniechęcić QA do aktywnego udziału w dyskusjach projektowych? Can I ask you please to rewrite it in English? Because I'm not sure I got this question. I'm sorry, but I hope that will be fine for you. And meanwhile, I will move to another question. What would you improve in the testing team you work on? Very interesting question. Thank you. The problem we are dealing with right now, and actually it has become the subject for my presentation, is a lot of stress. We have a lot of tasks, and we have right now even planned overtime, because there are a lot of demands right now, and we need to meet some expectations. And especially taking into account that there are some human factors that people need to go on vacations, to have some rest. There are not always substitutions for this role, or some roles may be overwhelmed. And also taking into account health conditions that everyone can be ill. This is something that we are facing upon. And we're trying to deal with the situation, but so far it continues. Moving to another one. Do you think programmers often have too big egos? I cannot say that it's about programmer or tester. It's rather about personality, because you can find people with big egos in every profession, I think. So it's about the mindset and the attitude, how people treat others, and how they are open for communications. Because one person can be pretty passive aggressive or provoke active conflicts, and I haven't noticed at least any specific tendency about like some roles in the team, that some roles have bigger ego or smaller. It's more about personality. That's my opinion. Yeah, thank you very much for all your questions. If the question that I asked to rewrite is fine to skip it, then that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your time and your active participation. It was really nice to see you.